my water testing.
I totally understand.
But I heard you went to Monson.
We did. Yeah.
So you know. I guess.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah, and one of our two of the board members that are here today, they were both there.
Oh, wonderful.
So,
That's great. So they'll be a little bit familiar.
Yeah.
That's great.
Good. Okay. And then to rally the troops here.
Rally them. So this is the mic you have.
If you could all please start coming to your seats, we will begin in a couple of seconds. So please take your seats. They're not listening. Thank you. So next we have the Environmental Justice Group's experience with POUs, and I have Shen Wang with a technical engineer with the Community Water Center. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's nice to see you guys all. I'm with the Community Water Center. We're a nonprofit organization based in Visalia, California, in the Central Valley. We work with communities so that they have safe drinking water. We're a team of legal, research, policy, community, and technical advocates so that we can attack the problem in many different ways so that communities can get safe water. So today I'm going to be talking to you about our case study in Monson. It's a small community in Tulare County, and basically what I want to talk to you today is about our experience with using them on the field, because we've heard a lot today in the morning, like, you know, how it is like tested in the lab and like what are the certifications that make it possible to be on the market. So I want to share with you like our stories from like the beginning to the end of this project. So today I'm going to go over like, you know, where Monson is, what's the profile, what's the project background, what were the factors that led to implementation of point of use, what was the community's water use and perception before the filters got installed, what was the implementation process like, you know, what were the steps that we had to do in order to actually install, what are the ongoing O&M operations and maintenance challenges we currently face, what are the benefits and also limitations of the technology, lessons learned in this general deployment project, and also the impact of the project. So this is a couple of pictures of Monson. On the right, you see like Monson. It's like about an hour or so south of Fresno. It's about 30 minutes from Visalia. It's a small, unincorporated community. The top is a typical house. It's a very small house, lot of land around it because it's agriculture. And then in the bottom picture is the Monson Market, which is really the community hub of when people come together. So this is a little bit description of like what is Monson. So it's, as again, a small unincorporated county, community in Tulare County. It's surrounded by dairy farms and agricultural fields. That's like what the local economy is. Most of the people who live there, they're either retirees or Latino farm workers. The population is about, according to the US Census, is 49 households and 188 people. All the houses are in private wells and septic systems, and the key contaminants that we found from water testing include extremely high levels of nitrate because of the agricultural activities that go on there, as well as bacteria, which happens a lot because of private wells, and then also DBCP, which is a pesticide. So even though like this particular case study is about private wells, the fact that we implemented it in small community also applies for like state smalls or like even like smaller systems, because you know a lot of the things that we find are also applicable. So I want to talk to you about the project background because as we've learned in a lot of these projects that are similar to Monson, you know, you can't just go in a community and say, hey, you show up the door like, hey, I know you have bad water, you want a filter? Like, that's just creepy. So basically, you really need community buy-in, because otherwise they'll be like, you remind me of this like snake oil guy that came a couple of years ago, and he tried to give me a filter for like $5,000. So you have like fundamentally, for a project to succeed, like you need community trust. So I want to talk to you about why this project succeeded in Monson, and that was because of the community buy-in and support. So basically, before we even install filters this past year, this work actually began in 2008. So it's a pretty long story. So in 2008, several community residents at Monson, they brought up their water quality concerns, and they formed a committee called La Voz de Monson, the Voice of Monson, to advocate for their concerns and problems. And so they reached out to us, Community Water Center, and also our partner, Self-Help Enterprises, which is a nonprofit that helps communities secure safe water by helping them apply for funding mechanisms that CDPH offers. And we help them secure resources so that they could actually test their water and back up their fears. And they found that the nitrate levels in a lot of the homes could be as high as up to 3 times the MCL. So the MCL is like 45 in California as nitrate, and a lot of times you see houses like like 100, 110, 120. So now that they had the evidence, they're like, oh my goodness, like we need to do something. So they identified the problem, and then they came back to Self-Help and us, and they were like, what can we do? And so we tried to explore long-term options. We were like, what are the funding mechanisms available? What can you do so that you can secure safe water for your entire community as opposed to one individual house? And as it turned out, we faced a lot of technical difficulties and delays, because Monson is one of those many communities that does not necessarily qualify for the SRF planning funding, because it's not a legal entity yet. So it's not like a public water system. So there was a lot of advocacy and efforts to make sure they have long-term funding access, and that's like another story. So in the meantime, many years dragged on, and then last year, so 3 years after the fact, we got a lot of media attention saying why is this a delay? What can we do in the meantime while the community gets long-term solution? And actually the local Rotary clubs, they all banded together and they said, hey, we can have an interim solution. We can actually donate and help out so that each household, if they want, they can get a point of use filter. So basically they fundraised and they got $15,000 from, corporation donations and private foundations. And also they muscled through so that, we also got $2,000 of in-kind water testing, which ended up being very crucial later in the story. And then the filter project began in October of last year. And basically what that meant was, before we install anything, we had to go back to the community and say, hey, this is a new opportunity now. We have this ability to pilot and install filters that can give you short-term drinking water, and so let's talk about this. So basically, I'm gonna go through all the steps and what it took, and then just as an update, right now, we just finished installing in most of the houses in June this year, and then so right now we're doing ongoing operations and maintenance and water quality testing, and also evaluation of the impact of the project. So this is an aerial map of Monson from Google Maps, and it gives you a really good sense of what this community looks like. So in the middle, you see kind of a triangle and a bunch of houses. So that's kind of the cluster of homes where most of the families live. Some of the people in the audience I know have actually been to Monson, so this looks very familiar. So basically it's about 40 households or so, and in the farther left, there's some scattered up, but in general, it's a very small community, about 200 residents, and as you can see, everything is surrounded by farming. So I want to talk now about like what happened, what were the people using before the filters. So this is a picture of a recent New York Times article about the challenges of drinking water in California in May. This is Laura Garcia. She's one of the community residents that lives in Monson. And you know, you can see here that she's buying bottled water for the use of her family. She has like about 3 kids, and she uses bottled water like, you know, a lot. Like it has to be used for cooking and drinking, and like basically anytime you like consume anything, you have to use like water that is like not with nitrates. So this was like a big pain because, as you can imagine, it's very heavy to carry a lot of times. You have to go to the store regularly because, you know, bottled water doesn't last very long. It's not very convenient, and on top of it, it's very expensive. I believe there was a study done by the Pacific Institute and us a couple of years ago, and it was like, you know, up to 20% of the household income per month can be spent on bottled water. So as you can imagine, given that a lot of these people, you know, are below the poverty line, this is an expense that, you know, can make a really big difference. So before we got implementing the filter, we did like surveys of families to like, you know, gauge like, you know, what was their water use and what was their perception of the drinking water. And so this is like a chart. So on the bottom is like different activities like cooking, drinking water, coffee, tea, drink mix, and baby. And then the y-axis is like number of households. We surveyed about 35 homes. And in general, as you can see, like most people, they like buy non-faucet water. So that's basically bottled water or vended water from a vending machine. One thing to do notice is like you can see that in terms of cooking, more people use faucet water because it's like right there. You can like fill up your pot of beans as opposed to drinking water. But it's important to note that if you have nitrates, you should not be drinking it or like eating food with it. So here's the perception of water quality. Of the 35 households we surveyed, 19 households said they thought there was a contaminant in the water. So you know, a little more than half. So basically, you know, most people who said if there was a problem, they said it was like nitrates. Some people said bacteria, and another few said they were like heavy metals. In general, the in Monson is very hard. Has a lot of total dissolved solid, and you can actually see when you go in like people's houses, like their faucets, they're caked with calcium. So I want to talk to you now for the next like 5 or 10 minutes about like the implementation process. So these are like the steps that we had to do to get filters in people's homes. So first we had to get community buy-in, and that was a mix of like outreach meetings and also door-to-door, like talking to people one-on-one about why it's important to have safe water and what we can do about it to help support you that. So we contacted about 41 households. You know, Monson is like an unincorporated community, so it's like really hard to find every single person, and they keep popping up. So, you know, as we're talking about this, you know, please remember that this project is not stagnant. Like if another family comes up and say, hey, I heard about this great filter and I would like to have it, like we will work with them so they have safe water. So we ended up eventually installing 29 houses, and the reason why not all of the houses that we contacted that got filters was some of it was plumbing issues. These filters are under the sink in the kitchen, and sometimes the plumbing just doesn't work out, like the pipes are in the wall, so it's like, you know, it's kind of hard, like the plumber doesn't want to drill in the wall to expose the pipes. Some people just weren't interested because they already had a filter, or and we checked their water, and in most cases the filter does work. And other people, they just weren't available because a lot of these people are migrant farmers, so you know, their phone numbers change all the time, and so do their addresses. So we learned through the first couple of installations that, you know, we even though we really want to install filters, we have to do a pre-inspection because every single household is different. Like, you know, their plumbing is different, where their water is located, like the shutoff is different, the sink material is different. It can be stainless steel or tile, and like you do not want to drill through stainless steel to like put in the filter. So you know that really requires a lot of prep, and the more informed we were about like the house before we installed, like the faster the process was. And then like we had an installation team of many different people, like Rotary, of course, you know, they organized a lot of the Rotarians to come out and help volunteer. There were plumbers that were also Rotarians that helped, and some of our staff also came out. And then as part of the installation, we need to know also if the filter is effectively removing the contaminants of concern. So, you know, we did a lot of water quality monitoring and testing in the raw water, in the well water before, like, you know, the filter is filtering out the contaminant afterwards. And this was very generously supported by Cal Water. And then we're doing evaluation, like before and after, to see if there was like changes in knowledge, perception, and behavior of the homeowners. And then also, most importantly, you know, this is a community-driven project, and we really want the community members to be empowered so that they can maintain the filters by themselves and contact us if they have any question. And also, you know, so that they feel empowered, like to know like what to do. Like, you know, if something happens, you know, if like a filter, like the light comes on and it's like time to change your filter, like they know what to do. If they get test results saying that, oh, in addition to nitrate, you have bacterial problem, they know what to do. So like we really want to make sure to work with them so that they're educated on every step of the way. So this is just a picture of the system and its replacement parts. It's the reason why this was chosen is it's certified by CDPH and NSF under Standard 50A, and it's most importantly affordable and available at Home Depot. So that, you know, a lot of these systems, like you have to go through special dealers, but this one is actually distributed through Home Depot, so it's very convenient. So the system is about $150. You have to replace the posts and pre-sediment filters twice a year, so it's about like $100 expense a year. Rotary actually has agreed to cover the cost of the replacement filter for the first year. And then there's a replacement membrane, and according to the manufacturer, it usually lasts between 2 to 3 years. We're gonna have to keep an eye on this because, you know, as we all talked about earlier today, you know, in the real world, the water quality, it doesn't just have one contaminant, it has multiple contaminants. So it can actually wear down the membrane a lot more faster than we expect. So this is a picture of the community outreach. Very early on the project, we held a community meeting outside of Monson Market. As you can see, all the community members sitting together, and you know, Rotary and CWC presented like the background of the project, you know, why we want to do it, and like, you know, and then families could sign up if they wanted a filter. And then we also did like door-to-door outreach, and I really want to share you a story about door-to-door outreach. So the people who come to these kind of meetings, they're already informed and they're already like very much engaged in like, you know, getting safe water. The families that don't come, they're more vulnerable. Like they don't really know the issue for whatever reason, or they don't have the time to come, and it's necessary to go door-to-door sometimes. And so, you know, there was one family, the Rojas family. So basically, you know, we just went up to them. Usually the people in Monson are very nice and very open. They're willing to talk to us because they know that we've been working there a long time. And we were like, hey, you know, talking about like the project and saying, do you want a filter? And the lady was like, well, I don't know. I heard that it leaks. I'm not quite sure. And we were like, well, you know, it's really important, especially because we noticed that she has kids running around the house and in the yard and drinking from the hose. And we were like, you know, this really impacts your kids. And then like, you know, 30 minutes later, you know, she was like realizing, well, this is actually very important. And at the end of the conversation, when she noticed her kids was drinking out of the hose, she was like, don't drink that. So it is important to reach out to people directly. So this is like the installations. This is a huge big box it's like this big, and Rotary basically would drive a truck to Home Depot and buy like tons of them for every installation date. We usually install between 2 to 6 houses on the installation dates. So here's Rotary. They're training their volunteers on how it looks like, where do you like install the different piping, The top two bottles on the green box, that's like the lab testing bottles for nitrate and bacteria. So we would always do lab, water quality collection on that day of installation. So this is just a quick picture of how the installations was. So as you can see, these are two, so the right and the left are from two different homes. The left is like a ceramic sink, and you can notice there's like the tank and like the whole system filtering underneath the sink, and then on the top there's like the filter faucet in addition to the normal faucet that you get the filter water out, which is kind of nice. And then the right is just kind of give you a sense of how installation day was. Big crowd of Rotarians, and then the plumber. Usually, we learned that it's good to have a lot of plumbers so that they can actually supervise and guide the Rotarians since they have a lot of expertise. So this is just a couple pictures of the education process. So we just recently had an O&M training. So you can see the community members learning about how to change out the post filters. In addition, we also did several well disinfection workshops and on-site disinfections for the community members, because as you notice, like, you know, a lot of these wells, like on the left, they're not well constructed. This has like where like the electrical wires going into the well, it's not sealed very well, so that's why, you know, it's a possibility things can get in the well, and that's where bacteria. So we found a lot of wells that tested for bacteria. So some cases, like, we're like, we cannot help you, but because you need to, like, you know, ask expert to like see if your well can be, like, you know, retrofitted. But in the cases that the well was well constructed and there was a place to pour the chlorine, and we could do the disinfection. So these are some pictures of the evaluation, just like surveying the community members. Just some data, because a lot of the data is still ongoing, so it hasn't been finalized. These are the first 6 families that were installed in October of 2012. The samples were taken a month later. The raw water you can see is like from 39 to 110, and this is in November, so remember that nitrates fluctuate over the course of the year. And then as you can see, the filter water like significantly can lower the water quality. But as you can see, like, you know, there's like one that's 100 and one's 110, and there's kind of a difference. There's like one is 7.4 reduction to the reduction level, and then one is 19. And like, you know, that can be anything from they have different contaminants, or like, you know, different concentrations of contaminants that are interfering with their rejection rate, or, you know, the water pressure of the house is like lower, so it's harder to like push out the contaminants. This is kind of just a simple chart to illustrate that, you know, the nitrate levels of point of use filtered water, they change over time. So this is one of the houses that got installed very early on. The raw water when we tested was 85. And so it goes from like 10 to 30 in April, so like 4 months later, and then it spikes in June, so like 7 months later. So, you know, the manufacturer recommends filters to be changed every 6 months, and we really do see like a lot of this backing that claim up. So I want to talk to you about ongoing O&M challenges. So, you know, with any technology, there's always like challenges, and especially with filters, operations and maintenance is the biggest issue in order to ensure that's sustainable and effective. So this picture is like a leaking. So this particular house, the Gomez house, they had a lot of problems, and we don't really know to this day, like, you know, what was going on. Maybe the pipe was just like too old, because we actually installed the filter twice. They got 2 new filters. Like, we took one out because it was leaking, and the second one's also leaking, and they finally just like took it out because they got frustrated. But like, this is definitely a concern, and the important thing to remember from this story is that you have to be really prompt and responsive to, especially if you're working with community, like, to their concerns, because, you know, like, this kind of slipped through the cracks for a couple of months because, you know, people were out on vacation during like Christmas, and like, you know, they couldn't get a hold of us. So basically what ended up was like they took it out, and they also like told our neighbors, like, you know, what a bad experience it was, and that really impacted our work. when we're trying to convince other community members to get filters, because they were like, hey, I heard about this house, like they had a really bad filter experience. So we're like, no, 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 like we're really sorry, but in general these don't leak. So just being responsive to community members and also like keeping an eye on them is extremely important. So the last O&M piece is, of course, water quality monitoring. We're really limited by resources of water quality testing. And so the top picture is very interesting. This was a house that had a filter before we got them to upgrade to the GE filter, which actually removes nitrates, because the one they had before was just a water softener. And it's a very kind of janky setup. Like they just have this box mounted on a cupboard, like underneath their sink, and it has like LEDs that's not connected. It's like, it says like it's working as green, not working as red, it's not connected. So it's like, it's a big problem. And then, so the bottom picture is, so I recently got a field test kit, and that really helped because before we were just doing lab testing, and many weeks would elapse before we would give the results to the family, and they would forget about it, or just not on top of their mind. But with the field kit test, like you can see you can see the color difference. So the one in the very far, that's like the raw water, and then the second one is the lighter one, which is the filter water. And when you see like a immediate difference, it really changes the community members perception and awareness of their filter, because they don't really feel assured, since there's no performance indicator tying it to the water quality. As Mark has said, it's mostly volumetric. So if the system has failed to give them safe water, they don't really know. So some families, they just don't really trust it. So this helps. Just like a kind of recap of the benefits that we found for the point of use is it's affordable and cost effective. It's very important the parts are available locally. It reduces total dissolved solid levels, so that means better taste in a lot of cases. So actually, it's very interesting. This is a like kind of a, I would say, side benefit in a lot of community members' mind of not only reducing nitrate but also TDS. Like there was one family that recently changed their filter, and then we got the test results back after they changed their filter, and it was like over MCL. We're like, what's going on? You just got a new filter replacement, and they were like, we tasted the difference. Like I don't think they installed the filter properly, because the water tastes hard again. And when we checked, and they were right. The filter wasn't installed properly. And the last couple pros is they don't have to buy water, like bottled water, and they don't have to travel for it, which is really nice because they end up saving money. One of the community members, instead of going to the vending machine like they do, now they just rely on their filter water, and the jug where they used to put their vended water in, they just, every time they go to the filter tap, they just put a quarter in to save their money, to keep track of their money. It's pretty cool. So I just want to talk about limitations of the RO point of use in the context of the NSF certification. So we talked about earlier the manufacturer, they have the option of having a performance indicator or giving test strips to the consumer. And what we found usually is in real life, the manufacturer opts out for putting it on the consumer. So that's really hard, especially for these communities that don't have resources to purchase a test kit or send or drive out 2 hours to a lab. And the test strip that they do include in the filter box initially, it's just a one-time use. So there's no ongoing operation and maintenance support. The another thing is so there's no performance indicator light that usually ties the water quality performance, and this is a major problem because in a lot of these communities that we work with, like Monson, the water quality levels, they're well over 100, and they're approaching the certification upper limit of these devices. And if the system fails, and it does not reduce nitrate down to a safe level, we have no way of knowing. And it isn't until weeks later when we get the lab results back, we're like, wait a minute, this is not right. You have to go back to bottled water temporarily. So that's just something to flag. The TDS monitor, I haven't seen anything in literature correlating TDS to nitrate removal. Like there's like kind of relationship, but not really. So, I'm still exploring like TDS monitors, like, if there's something we can attach onto the point of use, because like at least having something like a trend, like looking at it every day, like, oh, my levels, like they're relatively stable, or like there's a sudden spike, like, oh, something's wrong with the system, that would help. And then like, of course, for the levels, in the Salinas Valley and in the Tulare Lake Basin, where major agricultural industry is happening, like we identified with California Rural Legal Assistance, there's like over 20 systems in both like valleys that are over 120. So we're working on possibly changing the nitrate level standard that NSF has set to a higher level, because really the people who need this technology most are the most vulnerable, and they're located in these extremely high nitrate contamination areas. So basically, just a quick summary of like the lessons learned throughout like this entire project is the community aspect is super important. If you don't have community buy-in, you can't expect them to use the filters like after you hold their hand and like install them for them. You can't expect them to call you in the middle of the night and say, hey, my sink is overflowing, I think my filter broke. And you can't expect them to like actually let you into their houses, like sometimes just dropping by and checking their water. Like this is like having their level of trust and relationship is super important. And part of that is just reinforcing it with regular follow-up, just checking in on them. They just like really like to know that you care about them. There's a lot of logistical challenges, because basically if you install point of use, it's like an individual system, and so basically we have like 29 individual systems. It might be a little bit easier if they're all on a public water system, but in some cases, like the challenges are still remain the same, because you have to like administer and monitor and make sure they're getting replaced the cartridges regularly anyway. But you really, for a lot of these communities, this is an effective interim solution while they're working on a long-term solution, and we have to just do everything we can do so that the communities can have safe water now and later. And a lot of the limitations of the technology, they really impact the consumer, because they impact their ability to monitor effectively and feel like confident that their system is working. So I just want to show you like a couple quotes. One of our community members who's been very active in this project is Tony, and he was like, before the filter project, he was like, maybe if we catch it now, our children will benefit from it. He's like this grandpa who's like 7 years old. He's like, he's like looking for the next generation. But after the filter, he was like, actually, it benefits me too. I'm actually not buying bottled water anymore, so I feel safe about drinking tap water, which is great. So that's my presentation. Thank you. Questions?
Yeah, hi, I'm Mike Plasiak with the LaHont Water Board. What's the long-term sustainability plan for this community? In other words, who's gonna pay for the filters and whatnot over time? Is it the landowner? Is it the renters? Is it the Rotary?
So our plan is after this year, the owner or the renter, we'll connect them with Home Depot, and we'll say, this is available at your Home Depot, but you'll have to like pay for it. But the long term is actually Monson, like, they got SRF funding, and there's a possibility of like exploring the feasibility whether they could connect to a nearby town, Sultana. So that's like the long-term solution. So like hopefully, maybe like in 3 or so years, like they don't need these filters anymore.
Yes, Richard Booth, Lahontan Water Board. Do you know, or does anyone know, if the nitrate source is primarily from off-site sources or primarily from the surface, and the wells just have bad seals?
Paul, do you know that answer? Paul knows. Probably he's more of an expert. Paul works at self-help. He's our expert in the region.
Yeah, well, I don't think anybody knows for sure, but you know, there are some problems with well seals, but I would suspect that, you know, it's primarily an agricultural area, and there's been ag for a long time. By the way, we went out to Monson, tested wells 25 years ago, and tried to see if they might want to do something then. And the reason we went out was Fritz Redlin from State Health suggested that might be an area because he suspected DBCP contamination because really sandy soil and all the ag around. And what was interesting, it turned out nitrates was more of a problem than DBCP.
Thanks, Paul.
Tim Worley with California Nevada section of AWWA, and I'm wondering if this project, and I might have missed it, but I think that CDPH will approve a point of use program as an interim solution with a limited time frame.
Yeah.
How does this relate to that, or it sounds like this will go beyond what I thought the permitted time frame was. So
Sure.
how have you worked with the department on that?
So I've been in touch with Mark and Eugene very closely to work out like the logistical and technical questions of this project. Because this project was funded by Rotary, we're not on, you know, the same guidelines as, you know, if you were to apply for the interim funding that has been available as of this year in January through CDPH for the Prop 84 and State Water Resource Control Board State Cleanup and Abatement Funding. But really this project, like, you know, like the way it happened, it became kind of impetuous for the state to create this pot of money for interim funding. And as I understand, I think, you know, you can have like a point of use plan for 3 years and renew it based on how it's working.
Charlie Judson, Weeks Water Treatment. I'm wondering how many of these homes were owner-occupied or non-owner-occupied?
50-50.
I've been told by rural legal assistants in our area that landlords have an obligation to provide safe drinking water for any month in which they collect rent. And I'm wondering if that's a motivational factor for a landlord to step up to help here.
Yeah, so it's about 50-50 that when we did our surveys. Some of the landlords, they're very willing. Like in the Monson market, they have a well that they're sharing with 5 different dwellings, and they were very like supportive, and you know they pushed their tenants to get the filters. But in one of the houses, you know, like, you know, the landlord, he was like, not in my backyard, like, get off my property. So the tenant ended up not having the filter because they had plumbing problems. Like we tried, but we couldn't actually connect the filter. So it kind of depends.
Actually, just want to clarify for the Monson project, this is actually not a public water system. That's why when you look at the data, they have individual wells. So I think right now that they're I'm hoping to form as a public water system, so they qualify for state funding, and then extend an existing public water system to consolidate with them.
Questions? I think there's one right there.
I'll say my name this time. Janusinovich, CDPH. I'm wondering how the community's trust in point-of-use devices compares to centralized treatment, if you know. Like, if they were to install a centralized treatment plant, would people still drink the water, or they wouldn't because they don't see the device?
That's a good question.
I think that's a tough question to answer because like for a system right now on point of use with a reverse osmosis under the sink, it may have a lot of side benefits in addition to removing nitrate. Whereas when you have centralized treatment, you may be using ion exchange. You can take out the nitrate, but the water will still be hard. So I think there could be a perception, but we can't control that.
Those on the web can't hear you.
Did you come across any challenges with the sludge or what you had to filter out? That what I've heard is it's challenging to find places that might accept that. in our valley. So I'm wondering if you had any challenges and kind of how you worked around that.
So for households, for these point of use devices, there's like a black pipe that connects directly to the septic system or the sewer. And like, I think, so in general RO systems, it's like for every gallon of purified water, you like end up wasting 3 or 4. And like, we haven't heard any like stories yet of like their septic system is overflowing. But what we have heard on the front end as opposed to back end is, you know, these RO systems, they're very slow to produce the water. So a lot of times, like, you know, they'll produce up to 1 or 2 gallons a day. Very small because the water pressure is extremely low in most of these houses. So we've gotten calls from the community saying like when they're like filling up a pot of like water to cook their beans for the night, they're like, I ran out of water. What do I do? So, you know, we say, you know, you should store the water in your fridge so you have backup. Anything else?
Anything on the web? Nope. Thank you, Shen. Okay. Are there any other, we have a bit of a program change. One of our speakers that was going to be on today's agenda, we ended up putting on yesterday, so we kind of have an extra bit of time. We have a number of options. We could take general questions about any of the things you've heard this morning. We could break early for lunch and end early today. Do you have anything you'd like to ask of any of the speakers from today, and if there are any from yesterday that are still here? Anything that prompted your brain last night to ask today? No? Okay. Any questions on the web? auditorium@calipa.ca.gov? No. Oh, Fran. Fran's got a question. Good.
I would like to hear from those of you in the room, because it's going to be part of the closing, but I'm already anticipating the closing. Funding is a challenge, as you can see, and I can see some of the ways of getting to overcoming that challenge through things like Cindy mentioned, I think, in terms of collaboration, cooperation, regionalization, sharing the load with more hands so that there is funding. But from your experience with other systems and in other locations, what are some just brainstorm ideas as to where you think the state will, the state meaning the state and its citizens, should or could or will get funding for not just this project, but other projects that are associated with clean drinking water, particularly for low-income communities?
Matthew Keeling, Central Coast Water Board. Kind of a follow-up to Fran's comment, and I think it should be readily apparent from Shen's presentation today and the presentation of Jeanette and Omar yesterday is that state water boards, regional boards, CDPH, the county health organizations, I don't think this is an issue that we can address by ourselves. And what we really need is boots on the ground. We need these grassroots, NGOs, environmental justice groups, people that have inroads into these communities, can build relationships with them, help them identify where they are, what their issues are. So I think one of the areas where funding is crucial is some sort of a funding program to build on or support a lot of these grassroots efforts to address these disadvantaged communities. And that's something that we've been trying to do in the Central Coast, is to have better communication and coordination with these types of groups, with the understanding that we really need them to help us address this issue.
Thank you, Matt. Thought-provoking. Come on. There we go.
Terry Schrepfer with Provo and Pritchard. We talked a little bit about point of use systems. Are there any examples of point of entry systems being utilized in California?
We have very, very limited point of entry type treatment system. It's probably in a non-transient, non-community environment, like in a factory, that they use majority of the water for processing, so that water does not need to be meeting drinking water standard, and then they treat the water for all the within the office building water. So there are some ion exchange treatment that's split stream. Processed water would not be treated, and internal water is treated. So we have some systems like that. But for home distributed model, we don't have point of entry devices installed like at each home. The existing plumbing probably won't allow it, and then you have quite a bit of brine solution to deal with, because for the point of entry system, majority of them would be ion exchange based. From NSF, WQA listings, right now we don't have any ion exchange certified unit, because it's very difficult to certify. It's such raw water dependent. So all of that, you need to set it up. You end up running 30, if you have a 30 home system, you're running 30 treatment plants, trying to figure out when to regenerate. So ion exchange will be quite difficult to run as a point of entry. So in a community basis.
Just as a quick follow-up to that, does the state CDPH have an opinion on whether point of entry versus point of use is superior for drinking water?
I don't think I can speak for the department, but just as a professional, as an engineer, I think for looking at point of entry, we can have devices that will be complete change of how we think about water system. In your home, you may need to be dual plumbing your system. Then you can have a device that's outside. Someone can come and exchange a unit for you, ion exchange. Then the water is really fed to where you're using it for consumption. So that way, then you have the benefits of doing it. But it will require substantial changes to how people build homes and replumb and everything. That will be the big picture. But I think in general, for point of entry, under regulations now from CDPH, point of entry is allowed as a permanent solution for a water system. So you can install point of entry, but as I said, the challenge is the brine for ion exchange. And for a whole house reverse osmosis system, you have a problem, because you have corrosive water, and you have your water heater and everything in the house that you could solve your nitrate problem or other co-contaminants, but then you have lead and copper problem. So there's a plumbing issue within the house. So that could be a problem. But overall, by regulations, point of entry is allowed as a permanent solution for a public water system.
I think also for point of use versus point of entry, because we've come across, like we were exploring, if the Monson market, they have like 5 connections, on a single well, like doesn't make sense to have point of entry. And there's a couple issues. First of all, point of entry is very expensive. It's a lot more expensive. It can be like